Welcome to the Apeiron Life podcast. Today we're going to talk about wearables and monitoring in health, fitness, and performance.
Yeah.
So some exciting. This is recorded during the holiday season. I was supposed to get an amazing Apple Watch, which I didn't get. So
Yeah, me neither. What a bummer.
I'm just wondering how I'm going to monitor my exercise and fitness.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, you've come to the right place, Eitan, and I love that introduction. He's so smooth over there with his Yeti hat. And we're just cruising into this topic of monitoring. You raise a good point. You don't have nobody gave you an Apple Watch. You don't have a Garmin, don't have a Polar, and you just think, God, all my friends are out there training their butts off, getting fit this year, and I can't do it because I don't have the technology. But that's just not a good excuse, is it? So, well, we here at Apeiron, we've made sure that when we come up with solutions for trying to help people understand how to monitor their exercise intensity and just their exercise volume, that we really stay focused on being able to do it with a high-tech and low-tech solution. And so probably the most important thing to remember for people that are exercising is that your perceptions, you have a perception of effort that goes from just sitting in a chair like we are right now, pretty comfortable, all the way up to just like maximum exertion. It's like if somebody said, go harder, you're like, I can't. I'm going as hard as I can. I'm running as fast as I can. I'm cycling as hard as I can. I can't do any more. That sets up a continuum. And so one thing that we do here at Apeiron Life is we incorporate what's called a rating of perceived exertion. There's two rating of perceived exertion scales. The first one that came out was Borg's. That was that 6 to 20. And I used it forever before I actually learned that all you have to do is add a 0 and it estimates your heart rate. I don't know how I got through a year of using the Borg scale, and somebody's like, yeah, that was validated off of heart rate in young 20, 30-year-old men. And I was like, oh, that's so clever. So a 6 is a heart rate of 60, a 20 is a heart rate of 200 near max for young fit people. Later, a category ratio scale, a 1 to 10 scale was introduced. That one fits kind of the lactate curve, and it's a really easy one to use because it goes from like 1 to 10. Yeah. And with the 1 to 10, you can already start to do some really fun calculations. And it was Carl Foster that gets a lot of credit for coming up with what's called a sessional RPE unit. And what a sessional RPE unit is, you just take your perceived exertion and you multiply it by minutes. So we do this a lot. We go back to these standard recommendations for health that we're trying to get into. And if you're trying to just get to easy but moderate exercise, which usually comes out about 4 on the RPE 1 to 10 scale, and you multiply 4 by 150, then what you'll do, and that's 150 minutes per week. So you're going out 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, get 150 minutes, okay? And you're trying to get at just moderate intensity. It's not real hard, very sustainable. You might be breathing a little bit, but it's well within your capabilities. Then that's 4 times 150, that's 600. That's 600 sessional RPE units. And the cool thing about RPE is you can take it up to high intensity too. Vigorous or hard training is usually up around 7 or 8 on an RPE scale. So if you enter 8 and you do 75 minutes, 8 times 75 is 600. So It's so cool because you don't even have your heart rate. You just have perceived exertion. And our software that we've developed and built up, we use the RPE and the duration with the modality, and we can do a lot. And you're not even wearing a watch. And we can do tons of stuff to help give people feedback on their training.
So I have a little story, back in the days when I worked with Stanford Wrestling, we did that monitoring. We picked up about 12 wrestlers that were the starters. And I had interns that helped me with pen and paper, talking about low tech. And said, okay, at the end of the session, let's see how many minutes the practice was, and go ask those 10 wrestlers RP, perceived exertion. And in a team environment, it's really interesting because you always have the outliers. Oh, there was the one guy that always says 10.
Yeah.
Okay, gotta scratch that one out.
Well, it brings up a great point.
Yeah.
People lie to themselves all the time, don't they? Like, and when you ask people about food and what they ate, people who are really overweight, they're like, oh, I ate a grape and I
have a great diet. This is what I eat per week. So like, doesn't fit the picture.
No, it doesn't fit the picture. But you brought up a good point. That maybe we can kind of just center on a little bit with the wearables. And that is, this really simple question of why should I monitor my training? Why should I even do it? I mean, why don't I just go out and exercise, call it good? And I'd say three things kind of jump to mind real quickly. You can some people look at wearables like the real high tech end where they kind of want a pocket coach or like a coach on their wrist. They're like, I want my watch to tell me what to do. I want AI solutions. I want advanced algorithms. I want to be sensed. I want a huge database, and I want my watch to say, Apeiron, good morning. Today you'll be running for an hour. Good luck. I hope you can achieve your mission. So it's like a coach. But the other way I think we use it a lot is like a mirror. It's like a reflection. You know what you look like. You kind of, I hit the gym twice this week. I went out for a couple runs, but you kind of like, it's just how does that stack up? You know what you look like, but you look in the mirror and it's like, oh my God, I got broccoli in my teeth. Or sometimes there's little surprises in there. And so we use it as just a little bit of as a mirror to kind of say, this is what's going on.
Yeah. And I like that idea also, that mirror over a longer period of time when you see the trends. Well, that's when it becomes really, really powerful.
And I was going to say, that was my big number 3 is a log. You're using it as a log, as a record keeper, almost like a historian. And exactly like, somebody gets COVID. I think we all know people who've got COVID. All your physiology changes completely. Your exercise capacity changes completely. And when you come back, you wonder, am I back? Am I back where I was before? And you can look at your heart rate variability while you were sleeping. You can look at your running pace when you're out on your runs. You can look at your cycling power heart rate relationship, and that gives some indication like, oh, I'm back. This is good. It's a good reference point. So yeah, those I think that outlines it really nicely. Wearable technology can be used to log like a historian. It can be used as a mirror, as a reflection of what things actually were like with a little bit more fidelity. And it can also be used sometimes as a coach or a guidance.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Now, let's talk a little bit about different wearable technologies. So heart rate, etc. Yeah. So what's out there in the market?
Well, I mean, we're right here in Silicon Valley, so you got to say Apple. The Apple Watch has been pretty amazing. They've been able to basically, there's technology that allows you to send like light waves, and it will actually go down in through the skin, and the way it absorbs and the changes of the absorption frequencies as your heart pushes blood through all the vessels in your wrist. They can pick that up now, and they can tell you what your heart rate is. The traditional one, which goes way back in late 70s, 80s, was Polar. And what Polar did, these are the chest straps, and the chest straps are picking up electric.
And they have watches as well.
They do have the watch as well. The Polar straps, well, the straps really put Polar on the market, and they were looking at the electrical activity of the heart. And so as the heart depolarizes and contracts, there's an electrical status of the heart is changing. So you're able to pick that up with 2 electrodes, and they can be worn on a strap. And these algorithms are really good. Like these things are plus or minus, 1 beat off of EKG rhythms. So those are pretty common. There's some new stuff. You and I have both looked at it, where now you can use essentially computer vision technology. And through your phone, you've probably seen some of these. You can put your finger on a phone, on the camera area, and it will actually sense your pulse. And you can also, with a camera, you can put the camera on your face, and just the pixels that it's picking up, the color changes like under your eyes and through your cheeks that are associated. We don't even perceive it. We can't even see it. and it's picking up heart rate as well.
So I see you're wearing an Oura ring.
Yep, I am.
They pick up some heart rate as well.
Yep, they do. And so this also has the light absorption technology in it, but it's super, super small. It's a little bit different than, you'll see that they do that in little packets. They kind of go over these 5-10 minute packets, and they sample your heart rate and piece it together. They're very small and they're very light, so they don't have a lot of memory. I'm surprised how long the battery lasts. You get a couple days out of these, but the memory's not huge, this onboard memory. But you're right. You can do it through a ring. You can do it through a watch. You can do it through a chest strap.
So let's talk about pros and cons of each device, like chest strap versus a watch versus maybe a ring. When would you use what and for what reason? So
most of the wearable, most of the watches like Whoop, and this isn't just opinion. There's a number of really nice review papers that have been done, and they ask the question, how accurate is the Whoop compared to the Apple, compared to the Polar with the chest strap?
And Garmin.
And Garmin, that's in there as well.
What's the other Finnish one? Sunto?
Sunto. Yeah, that's another one that's really on the market. And there's a number of knockoffs, I think, India and Japan and China. There's a whole host of kind of no brand or white label devices that some of the fitness gyms pick up, and they can brand it their own. Suffice it to say that I think the take-home message from the reviews that I've read are that at low intensity at rest, if the ring fits well, if the watch fits well, if your body temperature is normal, if conditions are not too extreme, that resting heart rate on up to probably like this zone 2 up and around the 60-70% max heart rate, you can usually get plus or minus 2 to 5 beats pretty well. The problem happens when you move to high intensity. When you move to high intensity, there's usually a lot of movement artifact. The device starts to jiggle around a little bit. And so you can see huge variations when you're up over 90% VO2 max. You'll see people come back. We've had it, haven't we? Or people will be like, oh my God, I was out on a trail run and something's wrong with my heart. Usually my max heart is 165. I was at 205. And you're just going, yeah, it's probably your watch is not picking up an accurate heart rate. And that's the biggest problem of all. So one thing is accuracy. Going from low to high, you were saying, like, why would I pick one type of wearable technology over the other? Another thing is form factor. I don't mind the ring. Some people hate rings. They already have one ring on. They don't like another ring, so they don't really like it, or they don't like the way it looks. Some people don't want to sleep with a watch. They do not like wristwatch. They just don't. It feels constricted, so they don't use watches. The chest straps are pain, some people don't mind them at all. With cyclists, we just had it as part. They rode with heart rate straps all the time. Get to the NBA, working with the Sixers, no way are they going to. You'd be lucky to get them go through a training camp with heart rate straps on. They hate heart rate straps. They feel like it throws them off, or it's restricting. So the form factor is a pretty big deal.
Yes. And maintenance, taking care of it, changing batteries.
That's a big deal. Like, when Whoop came out, they had one thing that was kind of cool. I thought you could just keep wearing it and you charge the charger and then you slotted it on. So then you didn't have to take the watch off, which is kind of cool. But then the one thing they missed out on is there's no time. There was nothing else on it. It's just a thing on your wrist. So now you kind of look like, an escaped convict or something. You got this thing on your wrist tracking you, but it doesn't really do anything else. So some people love Apple because it's so versatile. You can get your messages. You can do all kinds of other things with it.
So why do you wear your Oura ring throughout the day, David?
So right now I've been looking at it. Usually I only wear it at sleep. But what I've been doing over this Christmas holiday is Aura's loaded up some new algorithms, and so have some of the other companies as well. And what they do, you'll notice they start to prompt you. They'll go, "Hey David, are you out on a hike?" They think I'm out on a hike. And so I get a confirm or deny, and then I think that strengthens the algorithm. So I'm just playing around with it right now. Like if I'm doing some resistance training, will it say, "Hey Dave, you're doing some weightlifting"? Apple does that as well, doesn't it? Yeah. It gives you a little suggestion of prompt.
Sometimes they think you're doing something, and they'll give you, "Are you walking now?" And then you click yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll give you a little nudge. Hey, you're not closing your ring today, or another 10 minutes of brisk walk and you can close your ring, or and this time of the day you're usually more active, or you're way more active than yesterday on that time of the day. So they give you different comparison things to try to motivate you. So you talk about the guidance per se. So that's their little nudges to make you just stay active, not necessarily for performance states.
To keep
more
it
of a
moving.
health. To keep
that might lead us into, and I'll be curious on your thoughts on this, because you work with them front hand, and we might flick to Donnie on this as well a little bit, because he helps people integrate the wearable technology to the software. There's a lot of personal preferences, aren't there? We've talked about the form factor, what it feels like on your body, but when somebody's using a watch, I can think of one client in particular that you know very well. If he can't get his heart rate working on his watch before a workout, he won't start his workout.
He's
so frustrated.
I have another person like that as well, that they get so mad. And they almost don't want to train. So they almost develop dependency on the wearable, which is good for the wearable company, but not really great for their mental health or well-being per se. I have to say, I like to wear my chest strap for when I train jiu-jitsu. And it really pissed me off when it's uncoupled, or it doesn't, or even the polar does not connect sometimes to the Apple Health, and it doesn't connect to my rings or stuff like that. It just like annoys me, even though I know I did something very healthy, but it definitely creates some kind of psychological effect in the software. So
I think so.
Something to be aware of. Sometimes it's like you're like a little stress-free without your wearables, isn't it? We had a few people talking about that.
It is. And I think that, one approach is to have like monitoring free weeks, and maybe Donnie, I'm going to throw to you for just a touch, because Donnie spent a lot of time on the software that we have built. We integrate with a lot of different types of wearable technology. So what integration means, we're pulling the signals in, but then maybe you could talk a little bit, Donnie, about the software is kind of got two features. If you miss a session, you can go in and you manually, isn't that the way it works now? You can update the session.
Yeah, it's some people don't want to wear, we're talking about the form factor. A lot of our golfers don't want to wear the watch when they're out golfing. So you could just easily go in and just log what you did that day, how long you were golfing, what was the intensity. I mean, if you're golfing probably pretty low, but hey, the difference between a 1 and a 2 might matter on a scale of 10.
Yeah, and then I think the advantage of that is, for, people talk about type A as a stereotype, but, some people don't like gaps. They don't like misses, and they don't like mistakes. And so when you go back, we talked about logging at the beginning of the podcast here, but instead of seeing all these gaps and go, I just don't know what happened, to have software like ours, and I'm sure others have thought of this too, where you can do a manual update to go, I know I was in the gym, I know I lifted hard for 30 minutes, and I don't want to miss that on my monitoring and logging. So you just go in and go, like Donnie said, resistance training. How hard was it? We talked about perceived exertion. You say it was a 6 or 7. You add that in. How many minutes? What type of modality? Boom, done. And that adds it in. The advantage then of the wearables is, if the wearables are working for you, you don't have to do anything. It's detecting what you're doing, how long you did it, and how intense it was. You just do it and leave.
So you talked a little bit about forecasting and predictions as well. There was some interesting stuff during the pandemic coming with the Aura, being able to show when people starting to get sick and COVID. And it brings me into an interesting story that Donnie and I were lucky to work with an MMA fighter before his last fight. And we connected him to our platform just to kind of watch and see what's going on. And I'm calling him and said, buddy, are you like overtraining? What's going on with you? Then I just watching it. The only thing that I connected it to his heart rate and chest strap, and he had the Aura, and basically he got COVID. Like he gave me a call the next day, man, I got COVID positive.
It's so
it's like
interesting. Yeah.
just insane.
It's really interesting. We had another client who was a really avid runner. Remember her? And we were monitoring her very closely. Same thing. It was like, and there's some papers now on this because I think they did a big like citizen science research project where Aura users could sign up and they could allow their data to be analyzed if they were confirmed with COVID and they knew the date they were confirmed and they went back and looked. And one of the things that happens when you get COVID, one of the real hallmarks is your heart rate variability drops out. It gets very low. You lose a lot of this parasympathetic tone and heart rate variability drops. And then the other thing, that happens is when they get the fever, they get the Oura Ring has the temperature monitoring as well. So it's a good point. Wearable technology is starting to be maybe more than just a reflection of exercise intensity. People are using it for other purposes, for women's health. Fertility is a really big deal, time of ovulation, and trying to predict when women are ovulating to try to help them if they're trying to, plan their family. This whole illness, trying to understand what's going on. Like maybe I'm starting to get sick, so watch myself before it happens. With that marathon runner I told you about, we monitored, she had long haul COVID. So it lasted for months.
I remember.
And it just did not come back. And she was so frustrated. And she's like, am I weak? I feel tired. I'm not motivated. I'm trying to run. I can't. We're like, your physiology is not back to normal, girl. You are not back to normal. And I think that sometimes gives you an excuse to be more appreciative of where your physiology is at. It probably is going to be the stage pretty soon. We've talked about it here at Apeiron Life, that your wearable technology will build up a record. And when you go and see a doctor, they're going to ask for that record. They're going to say, I want to see your record. Before I even talk to you, I just want to see you. I want to see the quantity, quality, and timing of your movement, exercise, and activity. And that's going to give me a much better perspective on how I give you medicine and how I work with you as an individual. Yeah.
How about low tech?
Yeah.
How can you monitor intensity?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about perceived exertion. Another one that gets a lot of attention, I know you've used it as well, is this kind of talk test. And it's perceived exertion can be a bit vague, and people are like, I'm exercising, but I don't know, is it easy? Is it moderate? I don't get it. And what you can do is you can say, well, let's have a little conversation. And if you can carry on a conversation and it's not very labored, then you're probably, we've talked about 5 zones of training, like zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 5, all 10% off of 50% max heart rate. But another way to do it, and Steven Seiler's really promoted this concept. He's an American from Texas, got a strong Texas accent, but works with a lot of elite Norwegian athletes. And so he's proposed, which is kind of nice, that really there's just 3 zones. There's a low zone, that's like 1 and 2. There's a moderate zone, kind of zone 3. And then there's a high zone, zone 4 and 5. And he just keeps it real simple: low, moderate, high. The talk test is great because if you can talk like we are now, you're probably low. If you can talk, but it's labored, but you can still talk, then you're probably getting close to that zone 3. And if you can just spit out words like yes, no, not sure, hold on a bit, you're probably up in the higher zone.
Yeah. So you brought it up, and I happened to work with Marty Malloy. She was Olympic bronze medalist in judo. I did her exercise prescription for like 12 years. And my cardiovascular training prescription was based on the talk test. We were very low tech and low, moderate, and hard, basically. So just simple. And I gave her guidelines, basically what you just said. On low days, I told her you can sing a song while you're running. Yeah. Or going on elliptical. Moderate.
So good.
And hard. Just simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
no, it's great. There's a fun little twist of kind of perception. This is all a low tech solution, and you can do it with higher intensity work. And it's something that we used with the Australian national cycling team. And it is basically breaking perception of effort into kind of 2 subcomponents. And the components are essentially how much of yourself did you give on a 0 to 100% effort. So 100%, say it's a hill climb that takes 5 minutes to get up to the top. We'd be up at the top. We'd have our little charts. We'd say, how much of yourself did you give on that effort? And with intervals, it can be the same power output for 4 intervals. The first one feels like 80%. The middle feel like 90%. The last one, same power, but you're falling apart. But then the second question is, how does it feel? And we would make this little ratio of how much of yourself did you give and how did it feel? And it feels like, we were down in Australia, so we using F-bombs and like it's bad on one side. It's a effing brutal, mate. All the way up to phenomenal. Like it feels fantastic. I feel like I'm ready to, I just feel amazing. And isn't it funny then of a 2x2 matrix plot forms where I feel like I'm not giving much effort. I'm giving like 50% effort and it can feel great, normal. I'm giving 50% effort. It feels terrible. I'm not even trying and it feels terrible. So that's a really nice indicator of residual fatigue, and maybe it's time for an easier day to come up. And then on the high end, I'm giving 100% and it feels terrible. Well, I'll wear that. That's a bit ragged. If this is one to watch out for, I'm giving 100% and it feels awesome. And whenever you see that with elite athletes, usually back them off of it. Yeah.
Do you think it's they pick too early or something?
Yeah, that's the worry. Yeah. If you're leading into a big competition, but I see this with normal people, with friends as well, especially if you get away and you can kind of exercise with people for like 2 weeks, and it's like during holidays or whatever, and they haven't been exercising much at all, and they're like after 3-4 days like, this is gonna be the year I'm coming good. You're like, oh dude, because normal at the beginning they were cautious and everything kind of matched. But you see this a lot, and we're talking about monitoring yourself without technology. One thing to be very aware of is when you're really doing more than you're used to and it feels amazing and you don't have a lot of history behind you, training history. You feel like Superman. I think it's Icarus and Daedalus, isn't it? Where they fly too close to the sun and the sun melts the wax off of the wings. And it's like this whole story, when it feels great, sometimes it's good to just wrap it up, tuck it down, and come back again tomorrow. Consistency is king.
So we talked about also programming. Maybe I'm just a little bit off the subject, but with training and prescriptions and unloading. So talking about that, using wearables or not even wearables, but how do we do it through our platform? That kind of like little cycles of unloading and loading.
Yeah, this is a good topic. I think it's a good topic, especially because let's preface the topic a little bit with just a little comment to anyone who's listening to this. Some will have read these papers and some will be aware of these concepts, but maybe some won't. So just to get everybody on the same page. So way back in the late 60s, early 70s, there was this physiologist who was out of Canada, Eric Bannister, and he came up with this model. It was like, for a lot of exercise physiologists, it was like, the E equals MC squared of physics. Like this was such a basic model. And he said, your ability to perform is going to be equal to your fitness minus your fatigue. It's so simple, isn't it? My ability to perform, I'm going to run 10K, and my fitness is going to guide how fast I can run. But then my fatigue is going to modulate that. So if I have high fitness and no fatigue, I'm going to run fast. If I have high fitness and a lot of fatigue, I'm not going to run fast. If I have low fitness and I have low fatigue, I can still go pretty good. But if I have low fitness and a lot of fatigue, I'm screwed. I got no hope at all. Okay, so that model moved forward decades. And now with Whoop, you see it, and with Polar, you see it, in this concept of readiness to train has emerged. And I find it fascinating because I kind of had to live through these whole 80s, 90s, 2000, and readiness to train is a concept that you're loading an elite athlete up with really high workloads, and they're starting to accumulate fatigue. And the beauty of the model was you accumulate fatigue faster than you accumulate fitness. So all of our training methodology and periodization was all around trying to nudge up fitness without overwhelming the system with fatigue. The cool thing with the recovery is your fatigue dissipates quickly, almost 3 times faster than fitness. And so that's why a taper works out so good. So somehow this concept, and you got me on my little soapbox here, but somehow this concept has become everyone looking at their watch, readiness to train. Oh my God, I can't train today. So basically what your devices are doing is they're kind of looking at how much training are you normally doing and how much training have you recently done. And if you've recently done a lot more than you normally do, it will say you're not ready to train. Now, for elite athletes, I don't mind this concept, and there's acute chronic ratios and a bunch of fun nuances. But for the normal person, I'm like, just get out and exercise. How can you tell me if you're exercising less than an hour a week, you need a kick in the butt. You don't need a readiness to train index.
What is it? Less than 30% of Americans meet the ACSM guidelines, or even less. What
it could even be like more than over 50. So it depends on what age group. It's very dependent. And so I've seen different quotes, but you're right. Probably easily a third, if not more, are not even meeting minimum guidelines. So I bring that all up to get us on the same page, because now we're going to talk about periodization. And I do think periodization is important, but it's not for readiness to train physically. It's not like you're overtraining. If you're doing 3-4 hours a week, you're not overtraining. The modulations that we take people through are more about the psychological readiness and the mental, fortitude that you need to stay consistent with your training. Yeah. So a nice rule of thumb is the lower the intensity, the longer your blocks can be before you need a little break. That you might go for 4 weeks and then take a light week because you're only doing primarily low intensity, low volume stuff. If you're doing high intensity, you can go every 2 weeks. You might want to give yourself a little breather and a little break to add in a source of variability. If you're working with individuals who get injured a lot and they build up inflammation and chronic inflammation, you might want to unload those joints quite a bit. I don't know. You've got a lot of different. I know that you have a variety of different clients, and you probably use different approaches for each one of them.
Yeah. So with some, I unload on intensity.
Yeah.
So let's say I give them the guidelines to go sometimes easy with our software. Accumulates 10 minutes per week in zone 5, for example. That's a common one. So on unloading week, I tell them stay in the lower zones. Yeah. Don't go high. Yeah. And some of them is frequency because they are doing like 2-3 sessions a day.
Yes.
And they do get those joint inflammations. Buddy, just cut down. Let's unload this week. I want you only to train once a day.
Yeah, that makes good sense.
So the unloading can go in, could be in the modality. Let's not be on our feet this week. So let's do less walks this week and go on the bike. So sometimes the unloading is not the total volume, but actually you take the fit principle and you can unload any part of it basically. Yeah. So
I love the one that's come up that we talked about before, because we work with a lot of golfers, and they'll go into a tournament, it's Pebble, it's AT&T or something, and they haven't been golfing a lot, but they don't want to look, they don't want to be embarrassed in front of their buddies, so they go out and they're just like, the closer they get to the competition, they're just going to drive. It's a driving range, they're just going to drive and drive and drive and drive, and then they, instead of like loading up with a little cycle and loading up with another cycle and loading, going in fresh, they go in hammered. So although it's intuitive, it's easy to make a little bit of mistake. Yeah.
So I'm going to lead you with last question for today.
Yes.
Where do you see wearable technologies going, both in health and then in more of the performance world?
Well, I think in health, I think what we're going to find is that that wearables are going to be combined better with perceptions. I think that there's one thing that people get at Apeiron Life, and it's really opened my eyes up, and that is when we do our client rounds and we sit in and we talk about a client, and the way listening to you and to Jay Berman and to listen to John and Joe and the whole team as they talk, I'm amazed at you guys you are sensors, you are human sensors, and you are pulling stuff out of the environment that no wearable sensor is actually accessing. You're talking about their mood and their demeanor and their motivation, and you're talking about their life. And I think that's really interesting, and it's very relevant, and it's very, very pertinent. And I think that there's going to be ways in the future. It's like wisdom of the crowd. We're going to be able to have small nodes of people that know us, and their perceptions are going to help kind of guide us and balance us. And it's funny, it's a family unit, really, isn't it? It's like, this is dad and mom and the kids, and it's a family sitting around the dinner table, people saying, how'd your day go? And people saying, well, why not tomorrow? Hey buddy, why don't we skip, your son does judo, like, why don't we skip that? Or why don't we, let's go for that. I think you can do that. And so it becomes like a group consensus. And I think in teams, like the teams you've been in and the teams I've been in, I think that's a big part of the environment that we don't really talk about that much, but it's like the tribe speaks. The tribe has a feel to it, and you get to, there's a resonance about how you feel about yourself, but what the tribe thinks. And sometimes it pushes you more than you think you can, and other times it kind of helps you when you don't think you need any help. I think there's a lot there that's going to be super, super interesting in the future. As far as, and that's for health. I think that's going to be for health. As far as elite athletes, I think we're going to find, and I lecture a lot about this, and it's a theme that I'm really excited about. And that's just how all the monitoring is going to become more and more, some people are labeling it now invisible monitoring. And it's going to be that you just go into smart environments and you play ball, or you get on your bike and you just ride, and you're not wearing, you don't even feel like a cyborg. You don't feel like you're instrumented or monitored. You don't get to be frustrated that something's not working. It's just, the bike is a smart bike. The gym is a smart gym. The home is a smart home. And what happens is this information, with full protection of your, all of your individual data, and trying to make sure that there's privacy respected, you feel like there's knowledge building up that helps people guide you, and then that you can access to try to troubleshoot these questions that come up in life that we all have.
Yeah. It just brings me to like a little point at the end. I had the opportunity to travel to an area called Dagestan in Russia.
Oh, wow.
Where some of the best wrestlers and MMA in the world come from. And they have zero technology. They have tradition. Talk about like the environment, society. Talk about the Kenyan runners, etc. And sometimes how those affect as well. So we got to keep in mind that technology is great, but we got to also be aware of environmental effects and constraints of one, performance, two, even about health and wellness. So, look at Rio de Janeiro, what an active city. I don't know if you got to, you've been.
We went for a prep, but I actually went to the Sixers right before the team went to,
I've been in a conference there, and like, it's a lot of like home, like outdoor facilities open to the public, and everyone is so active. They don't need necessarily sensors or watch to motivate them, but it's just beautiful to see. So sometimes like the simplicity of the culture helps a lot. So just to see those two little things, it is really interesting. And I think maybe juxtaposed right beside that concept, it's like the blue zone research and blue zone concepts, just lifestyles that support healthy, long living, which we all can embrace. And then we're here in the middle of, Silicon Valley, and the people that we're working with are literally changing the world. Like their minds are changing the world. Steve Jobs changed the world. Elon Musk has changed the world. And so we have people who are living lives that are important for humanity, they're important for society, and they're not living a life that's like this woman in Okinawa, are they? And so you wonder if, some of the questions we have is, we can't convince the guy that's running one of the top gaming companies in the world right now. Can you imagine how competitive that market is? This dude is working his butt off right now to try to keep his company alive, afloat, and doing the things that are profitable and make his board happy. So we're actually learning from these groups, these tribes, these regions, these blue zones. But then what I think is a really interesting question to ask is for the surgeon and the pilot and the policeman and the fireman and the dad and the mom and the person that's a city dweller, how do they
use wearable technology to capture as much of the good stuff as possible so that they can get as close to this, woman in Okinawa, all the goodness that she has. How can they capture as much of it as possible in this lifestyle that's definitely not like living in Okinawa?
And on that note, thank you very much. That was very wise way to finish our episodes.
Yeah, no, it's
that was
super
great.
super interesting.
Yeah.